Hello, middle school. Hope you enjoyed Tuesday's pandemic video and all of the relevant and current information that it's giving us about this incredible and challenging time that we're living in. We want to do part two of that today. So, in our final part of this series, we're going to have three topics. What's going on with the economy because of the pandemic? What's the role of faith in these challenging times? And how do we practice mindfulness and self care in these particular times? So, first up, to help us with the economic pieces of this, would be Mr. Corcoran. Mr. Corcoran is a veteran St. Andrews faculty member, a beloved middle school teacher and advisor, and he also teaches AP Economics in the upper school. Mr. Corcoran is going to help us understand what's happening economically due to the pandemic. Thanks, Mr. Corcoran.
Hey everyone, Mr. Corcoran here, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about how the current pandemic is affecting the economy. What's the economy? The economy is the total value of everything that gets bought, sold, and produced in the country. It also includes things like how much businesses and people are saving, borrowing, and investing. All that economic activity has a big impact on people's lives. Some of you may have heard or read about how the pandemic is impacting the economy, and the news has been bad, really bad. The biggest problem facing the economy right now is unemployment. Unemployment measures the number of working age people who are actively looking for work, but currently don't have a job. As you can see, there are over 22 million newly unemployed people in the country, and that data is from almost 2 weeks ago. In the graph, you can also see just how quickly unemployment has skyrocketed during the pandemic. Not earning income from a job makes it hard to pay for basic necessities like shelter and food. So there are a lot of people who are suffering right now from recent developments in the economy. There's a good chance you know someone who has lost a job or who is working fewer hours than they'd like to. Why are so many people losing their jobs? Well, as people stay home to protect themselves and their communities from the virus, a lot of economic activity stops happening. People aren't going to restaurant shows or sporting events. They aren't going to the mall or getting haircuts. Tourists aren't visiting, and they aren't spending their money on flights, hotels, and t-shirts. With less and less money getting spent, businesses of all types and sizes can pay fewer and fewer workers. The rest end up without jobs. This affects everyone in the economy. As more and more people lose their jobs, they can't spend as much money either. So now there's even less economic activity happening, businesses are still losing money, and more people are at risk of losing their jobs. It's a vicious cycle, or as dorky economists like to call it, a multiplier effect. You may have heard that this multiplier effect has put the economy in a recession. Technically, that isn't true. A recession is a period of 6 consecutive months during which the economy has gotten smaller. It's only been a few weeks so far, but it is very likely that a recession is coming. Recessions aren't new. The economy has experienced periods of decline several times in the last 100 years. This really big dip is the Great Depression, which began in 1929 and lasted through much of the 1930s. The most recent recession took place between 2007 and 2008. When it isn't in a recession, the economy is growing. Economists call this an expansion. The pattern of expansions and recessions is called the business cycle. A really positive takeaway from this graph is that despite recessions along the way, the economy has steadily grown. In other words, recessions end, and they're usually followed by longer periods of expansion. And there's more good news. There's a lot the federal government can do to limit the severity of the recession. The two main tools are monetary policy and fiscal policy. We'll see how the government is using both to support the economy during the pandemic. Most of the time, the part of the government that manages the economy is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is right here in Washington, D.C., and it's the central bank of the United States. The Federal Reserve's main jobs are to help the economy grow and to keep prices from getting too high. It also keeps an eye on all the other banks to make sure they're following the rules. When you borrow money from a bank, eventually you have to pay it back, plus a little extra. The interest rate determines how much extra. When it saw the economy was struggling, the Federal Reserve cut the interest rate to almost zero. With less money to pay back, more people have been able to borrow money and spend it. Remember the multiplier effect? As that money gets spent, it sets off a positive multiplier effect. Businesses are selling more goods, they can pay more workers, and those workers will be able to spend more money too. Unfortunately, these aren't normal times, and the Federal Reserve can't save the economy by itself. That's when Congress steps in with fiscal policy. Fiscal policy refers to how much the government taxes and spends. The House of Representatives and the Senate control the country's fiscal policy, and while Republicans and Democrats often disagree about these decisions, everybody agreed that Congress needed to do something quick. Congress has passed a stimulus package of over $3 trillion, by far the largest in history. These laws increase government spending to trigger another round of that positive multiplier effect. The stimulus package includes funds for many different parts of the economy, but four of the biggest include money to small businesses so that they can pay their workers. Adults who earn less than $75,000 a year will each get a check for $1,200, with more for those who have kids. With more money to spend, the economy will avoid the worst effects of the recession. In addition, more money will be available to those who've lost their jobs, and lots of money will be spent on hospitals, healthcare, and medical equipment. This is likely just the first wave of government spending. Look for Congress to add fiscal stimulus several more times in the coming months. The big question is, how long will the recession last? How long will it take the economy to recover? No one really knows, because it depends on how quickly people can get back to work. And that depends on how effectively we can trace, control, and treat the virus. Some economists think it'll take 6 months for the economy to get back to full strength. Others think maybe up to 2 years. But either way, all economists agree that eventually we'll get back to full capacity, and from there, the economy will keep on growing.
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. It's always good to have your perspective and to hear your voice, and we certainly miss you. Next up is another familiar face to many of us, Reverend Patty Alexander, who was our middle and upper school chaplain for 8 years, is the parent of a St. Andrews graduate, and the parent of current St. Andrews Jr. Peter Alexander. Reverend Alexander will talk to us about the role of faith and community in this particular time.
Hello, St. Andrews. I am the Reverend Patty Alexander. I'm an Episcopal priest at St. Dunstan's Church here in Bethesda. Before coming to St. Dunstan's last fall, I served as middle and upper school chaplain at St. Andrews, in the position that Chaplain Isaacs now holds. I'm also a proud St. Andrews mom, and I'm really glad that I'm still connected to the school. It's a special place, especially at a time like this when we all need to feel connected and supported and loved. Mr. Kazaski asked me to say a few words about the COVID-19 pandemic as a person of faith, which of course I'm honored to do. I can only speak for myself, but I suspect that my experience is probably pretty similar to what many people are feeling right now. A crisis like the one that you and I are living through raises a lot of questions for all of us. We want to know why. Why this developed in the first place, why it has spread so broadly and so quickly, and why people are dying in such vast numbers. We quite naturally want to make sense of something that seems to make no sense and that seems really unfair. In addition, as a priest, I'm often asked, why, if God is good and loving, would God allow a tragedy like this to take place? This is probably the most fundamental question that people of faith are asking, and I'll say a bit more about it in a moment. I don't pretend to have the answers to these questions, although I admit to spending a lot of time thinking about them. This crisis is challenging to many people of faith because we want to believe that if we are good, not perfect, but good and compassionate, and if we do our best to care about and serve others, then God will protect us and those we love. And if we pray sincerely for a particular outcome, like healing, then we expect that God will grant that request. But we know that it doesn't always work that way. It's frustrating and discouraging, to say the least, to feel as though we have so little control over what's going on around us. And it's natural to want God to fix it. I think that many faithful people are struggling right now to reconcile their belief in God with all the bad news that just seems to cascade down around us these days. It also has to be said that it's difficult to be so isolated. As you well know from not being able to be with your friends and teachers at school, it's really hard not to be together as a community, especially at a time like this. It's lonely. Even with Google Hangout and Zoom and FaceTime and all the other ways we try to connect electronically, it's just not the same. And in my church, we have a lot of older folks who live alone and who aren't connected on devices. And it's a struggle for them not to be with other people. I worry about their mental health as well as their spiritual health. We all need one another, and it's challenging when we're apart. I suspect, or at least I hope, that once we're out of isolation, we'll no longer take this gift of community for granted. That may be one positive outcome of this crisis. Having said all of this about the difficulties of holding on to faith right now, I'm really grateful for the gift of my faith. Along with my family, it is what helps me get through each day. I don't believe that God allowed or caused this virus to happen. I don't. But I do believe that God is here with us in the midst of it, in our suffering and in our sadness and even in our anger. I don't believe that we are alone. This is what sustains me, and this is what I especially want to share with you. I believe that God loves us and that God is working through people, through you and me, to help care for others. I'm inspired by the genuine goodness and heroism of so many who are on the front lines, caring for the sick, feeding the hungry, and working to try to develop a vaccine to stop the virus. I'm also inspired by the small acts of compassion and kindness I've witnessed as people try to support and provide for those who need help. I find that I'm praying not so much for God to eradicate COVID-19, although that obviously is my greatest hope, but more for me to find the strength and courage to act as a force of good in my own community. I may not be able to change my circumstances, but I can ask God to change the way I respond to them. Finally, I believe that as a child of God, I am part of something bigger than just myself and my family, and I take great comfort in that. I feel deeply connected, as much as I can be under the circumstances, with other people, and that is a tremendous gift. My faith also teaches me that life has inherent dignity and beauty and worth, that life isn't random. It has meaning and purpose. It's so important to celebrate and affirm that gift of life, which, as we know, is short. This is what gives me hope, and we all need hope, especially right now. I'm praying for the whole St. Andrew's community, that you will stay safe and healthy, and that you will emerge from this experience stronger, even more compassionate and loving than you were before. May God bless you all.
Thank you, Evan Alexander. It's good to see you, dear friend, and we certainly hope that you and yours are well. And at the last part of our series, we're going to have Robyn Forman, who is a new face for many of you, but will become very familiar as she will be our new school counselor starting next year. She is going to talk to us about the role of mental health and well-being. Thank you, Ms. Forman.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robyn Forman, and I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. I'm really excited to be joining the St. Andrew's community next fall as your school counselor. During this time, COVID-19 can really affect your psychological and mental well-being. I wanted to offer a few tips on how to best handle that during this time. I hope they're helpful, and I'll see you soon.
Since you've already been in this situation for a couple of months, you've likely already experienced many frustrating emotions and wondered, how am I supposed to be dealing with this? I'm going insane. Or you may be taking all of this in stride while a friend of yours appears to be losing their mind. We all respond to things in different ways, so it's best to not compare yourself with others, There's no right or wrong way of dealing with this. You've probably seen that people within your own family are dealing with this in their own ways. This is an unprecedented time in history, something that we never expected to happen. It can feel unreal at times. So however you're responding, allow yourself to feel that way. You've probably even noticed that your feelings can change from day to day. Because of all of this, our everyday routines have been completely disrupted. You may find yourself staying up later, eating more or less, having more or less energy. It can be easy to fall into an unhealthy rut. Many of us miss the routines that created a much more structured day. We would wake up, eat breakfast, go to school, and we could have a reasonable expectation of what we would be doing each day. That structure creates a sense of safety for us. It's important to try and create some sort of routine for yourself during this time. Have you noticed that you may be eating more junk food or not getting enough sleep? Teenagers need at least 8 to 9 hours of sleep each night, and your mood can be negatively affected if you don't. Being at home more also allows us more time to sit on the couch and not get enough exercise. Try to spend time each day being active and, if possible, spend some time every day outdoors. More time at home likely means more time on devices. As great as technology can be, allowing us to stay connected with friends and families during all of this, it's good to know when to disconnect. If you're spending hours of your day on devices, you may notice changes in your mood. Try to listen to your body. Get up, walk around, do something different. Do you like to listen to music, dance, or do art? Have you tried baking or cooking? If there was ever a time to try something new, this may be it. Do you have an animal at home? Studies have shown that pets can be therapeutic. Sometimes just petting them can bring us calm. If you have a more active pet, playing with them can be a great source of exercise. And if you have a goofy pet like mine, a source of laughter as well. Here you can see my dog Pippi on a yoga mat. Probably one of the most important things to learn, not just during this time, but in life in general, is how to communicate in healthy ways. You'll hear a lot about this from me next fall. When you're frustrated or dealing with difficult emotions, you may be tempted to take it out on those around you. Even if you are upset or annoyed with a family member or a friend, you probably know that if you start telling them everything that they're doing wrong, that their response will probably not be particularly well received. When someone feels cornered or blamed, they will become defensive. By using something called I statements, you let someone know how you're feeling using I instead of you. For example, if you tell someone, "You're driving me crazy because you always drink all the juice," the person that hears that may not respond in a way that's helpful for everyone involved. If instead you say, "It makes me feel really frustrated when you drink all the juice, so maybe you can save a bit for me next time," that might be received a bit easier. Let's try another one. Let's say your mom always asks you to complete your chores right when you wake up, and that's usually when you feel the most grumpy. During the day when you're not grumpy, you can address this with your mom by saying, "Mom, it makes me feel really frustrated when you ask me to do my chores first thing in the morning when I'm hardly awake. Do you think you could leave me a note instead or ask me after I've eaten breakfast?" This may be received much better than, "Mom, you drive me insane when you talk to me first thing in the morning." I imagine no one's day will seem very bright after that. Uncomfortable emotions can be described as any feelings other than positive ones. For some reason, we have a much harder time expressing feelings of sadness or fear. During this time of quarantine, when we're all feeling confused and frustrated and sad, we may feel more like isolating or keeping our feelings to ourselves. This is actually a good time to practice expressing our feelings to others. Let your parents know if you're feeling scared or unsure of the future. Reach out to an adult that you might trust. And if you're not sure who to turn to, you can reach out via the crisis text line listed on this presentation. This is particularly important if you're starting to have thoughts of hurting yourself or someone else. Please reach out. And if you're ever unsure who to contact in an emergency, you can dial 911. In a time when everything seems uncertain, it probably feels like we don't have much control over anything, but we can take control over how we react to others. By using healthy communication like I statements, we are able to keep things at home somewhat more peaceful, and by reaching out when we feel difficult emotions, instead of isolating or lashing out, we are taking control of ourselves, which can feel really positive. I'm sure you've all heard of gratitude. Studies have shown that expressing gratitude when we're feeling low can increase feelings of happiness. Try to take some time each day to find at least one thing for which you are grateful. It can be something really small. During a time of so much sickness, perhaps we can just be grateful for our health. While some are spending their quarantine alone, even though our family can be frustrating at times, we can be grateful for people around us who love us. Keep in mind that this is not forever, even though sometimes it feels like it is. If you remember nothing at all from this presentation except this last slide, that's okay. Please don't forget to take deep breaths every day. Fill your lungs with air, then slowly exhale. Do this multiple times a day. And find ways to laugh. Find the humor in everyday things. Call a friend that makes you feel good. Watch a comedy. Read a funny book. Laughter is therapeutic. I hope some of these tips will be helpful to you and your family. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Ms. Forman. It'll be great to have you at St. Andrews in the fall. Thank you for all of your insights and guidance. Thanks to everyone who participated and lent their voice and expertise to this two-part video series. I know it gave me much to think about. I hope it gave you much to think about. And I hope that you and your families continue to be well, that you're healthy, that you're happy, and that in all of this, you also find minutes to be absolutely joyful.